This is Hockey Talk, episode number 16, where we talk about everything hockey. We are recording on June the 27th, and I am John.
And I'm Mike.
All right, Mike, let's go. And the first topic, of course, Mike, is let's talk a little bit about the Stanley Cup. And I'm going to give a quick rundown of what happened in the series here. I know most people know or everybody knows, but I'm just going to go through this real quick. The Panthers had a 3-0 lead. Okay. The Oilers scored a big 4 goals in the first 3 games, and both of us thought the series was over. I know I did. I believe you did as well. Game 4, which we watched at a pub downtown, at a pub in town, the Oilers won 8-1, just an absolute massive blowout. Bobrovsky got pulled after the 5th goal. Then the Oilers, they go home, they win that game, they win the next game, and sure enough, the series is tied 3-all. I don't think either one of us thought that was going to happen. So
No.
here we are headed into a game 7. Awesome. We love game 7s. The Panthers, they managed to grasp victory with a 2-1 win, and they won their very first Stanley Cup. Mike, what did you think of the finals, and what did you think of game 7?
Well, you know what? I was hoping for a really good Stanley Cup final, and sure enough, that's what we got. Um, you know, I thought that Florida played exactly the way they needed to play the first 3 games that they had. They dominated most of those games for the most part, shut Edmonton down, played their style. Then the next 3 games, it looks like I'm not sure what they were doing. They didn't play anything reasonably close to what they did the first 3 games. Did not play their style. They kind of played a little bit more, a little less physical, which, you know, is what I believe that's the bread and butter that got them to the Stanley Cup final. So deviating from playing that style of play did not help them. So I'm not quite sure, what was going on for those 3 games, but the last game they brought back the style of play that they did in the first 3 games, and ultimately they ended up winning the series.
So I've got another question for you here. Do you think that this has anything to do with the Florida Panthers unknowingly? Because, I mean, they would never do this consciously. Or say, you know what, we're up 3 games to none and we're going to win the Stanley Cup. And they just took their foot off the gas pedal.
Well, I think maybe it's a combination of that to a certain degree, and it's the Edmonton Oilers coming out and basically telling themselves, "Listen, we don't want to get swept. Let's go win a game." They won. Then, going back to Florida for Game 5, they're like, "Well, if we can get this to Game 6, we got a pretty good chance." And they won Game 5. Game 6, just like I had thought they would. They came out and won that game as well. So, but then getting it to a Game 7, it was anybody's game, but Florida came out and played their style. The last 2 games of the series, they shut McDavid down. I mean, after 2 games of having 4 points in each game, in games 3 and 4, or sorry, games 4 and 5. So then they shut him down. And I know that doing a little bit of reading, they said that McDavid and Draisaitl had played in the playoffs injured, but I don't know the details to that other than that's what was said. So you know, it was Florida series to lose the whole way across, and I don't know if they had have lost Game 7, what kind of direction that they would put that team in for next year. But now I think after winning, I think they're going to try to re-sign most of their guys and go for another run at it.
Right. They have the room to re-sign most of their players, don't they?
They got about 20 million in cap space. They're the big guys they need to sign. Well, the big one is Sam Reinhart. So I think they're going to sign him. He's probably going to get between 8 and 9 million a year, I would say, maybe more, but I think he's in that range now. So that's one guy off the list. They got a few defensemen that they need to get signed, more or less depth defensemen. I think they should bring Ekman Larson back. He had a great year for them after some disappointing years with Arizona and Vancouver. He stepped his game up this year, especially at the beginning when he had to fill in for playing on the top couple pairings or the top pairing with Ekblad and Montour both hurt. So speaking of Montour, he's the other big free agent that they have. So if they can sign him to a deal around 7.5, as well as getting Reinhardt in, I think that they can probably get their depth players signed to a reasonable cost. So I think that for the most part, they're going to have the majority of the guys from that team back next year. I'd be surprised if they don't.
And you think Bobrovsky will be the starting goalie again next
Oh,
year?
absolutely. Yeah. There's, yeah, he won the Stanley Cup for them. And I mean, he was, he's their guy anyways, making $10 million a year. So
Right.
it's not like you could turn him into a backup, at least not yet. So,
There was one point I noticed in the third period where he was down and out. McDavid had the
yeah,
puck. Well, the puck was at McDavid's area, but the defenseman was so all over McDavid. I don't believe he could get a stick on the puck. I don't think he ever touched
no,
it.
nothing enough to get it in the net. Anyways, I mean, there was a few scrambles there later in the game where Edmonton had some chances, and the Florida at one point had three guys trying to block one shot. They're the one that went back to the point, and so they all put it all out on the line. They weren't taking it easy this game, so they did what they needed to do.
All right, well, let's go on to the second topic, and I'm just going to go over what happened in the past here. So in 1942, the Maple Leafs were down 3-0. They came back against the Detroit Red Wings, and they won 4 straight. Now, that's the only team to have ever done that in the finals. In 1945, so 3 years later, the Detroit Red Wings were down 3-0 to the Leafs again. The other way around, obviously, this time. The Red Wings tied the series, and then they lost Game 7. And now that has happened twice because here we are with the Oilers again attempting to win, and they fell a little bit short. Now, Mike, can you give us any more insight, any other reasons you can think of why the Oilers lost this series?
Well, first and foremost, they put themselves in a huge hole, down 3 games to none. You can't do that. I mean, eventually, you know, when you do, it's forcing your team to win 4 in a row, and to win 4 in a row against the other team that's in the Stanley Cup final who hasn't lost 4 in a row, it's very unlikely. So, I mean, they almost did it, but they dug themselves in that hole too soon. In those first 3 games, they need worst case scenario. They're down 2 games to 1. It's a completely different series, but
Right.
down 3-0, it was just too much to overcome. I mean, they played well in games 4, 5, and 6 to get back in it, but game sevens are game sevens, and the Panthers reverted back and played the style of play that they needed to play to win. And maybe the Oilers, after winning those 3 games, maybe they kind of ran out of gas a little bit. So
Well, I thought it looked like that they did actually, and I mean Florida was just all in their face. I believe Oilers only had 23 shots in the game. I think
right,
it's
and
not a
the
lot of
other
shots.
the other thing that I found was that Florida limited the high danger chances.
Yes.
So, the Oilers had some. However, in the previous games, there was, shorthanded breakaways and 2-on-1s and things like that. So, I mean, they really tightened it up defensively as well. So they didn't give up those type of chances, and more or less they try to keep the Oilers to the outside, which which is what you want to do. You don't want to let their guys in the high slot get taking shot after shot. So
Right. Plus, the Oilers didn't have many power plays in that game 7
right,
either. It was
yeah,
either one or two or one. I forget which one it was, but
yeah. Well, they had one in the first period when Kachuk wiped out and
oh yes, yeah.
beat out. I'm a little surprised they called that. I mean, it was kind of incidental contact, but I mean, technically, yes, I suppose it's a trip, but it was without intention whatsoever. But nevertheless, they killed that penalty off, and you know, uh, that was another big turning point. Florida needed to get the first goal, I think. Might have been a different story if Edmonton had got the first goal.
Right, right. Yeah, and I was pretty sure that in that game, unless people were getting murdered out there, there was not going to be a lot of penalties called because I know they do not want to decide Game 7 on penalties.
No, exactly. And there was a few plays that were, earlier in the series, I think might have been calls, but
Right,
a game seven, the a little bit of the interference and the that sort of stuff was kind of, you know, uh, not called. So
right, right. Well, okay. Well, let's go on to our third topic for this evening now. Connor McDavid won the Conn Smythe Trophy after
mhm.
Game 7. Now, the Conn Smythe Trophy, for anyone who doesn't know, is awarded to the player as the most valuable to his team for the Stanley Cup. Now, McDavid led all players with 42 points, 8 goals, 34 assists in the playoffs. Now, he did not come out on the ice to receive his award. So, now, Mike, if McDavid had lost Game 7 in Edmonton, do you think he would have come back out on the ice to receive that award?
I think in Edmonton he probably would have. Um, I mean, I don't blame him for not like in Florida. I mean, the fan when it was announced, I mean, the fans were booing. I mean, I don't know why. It was. I think they were thinking Bobrovsky deserved it, but in which up until losing those 3 games in a row, I think Bobrovsky probably had that in the bag as well.
Right. Yeah.
Um, However, you can't discount the performance that McDavid had in the playoffs because there's no way that team probably would have got by Vancouver without McDavid playing the way he did. So, I don't fault him for not coming out. I mean, you lose Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. Like, it's almost like when you're watching the Olympics and stuff like that, and like for hockey, when they're handing out the silver medals, guys they're not happy about,
No.
what I mean, but they've got to go. And the same thing at like the World Juniors. I mean, I know in the past you've seen some of these World Junior guys like they'll take the medal off immediately after. One guy threw it in the crowd, so it's it's tough, and you're not going to see anything come of it, I don't think. So
All right. Well, do you think McDavid will receive any blowback for not going out to accept the award? Now, I say that, and I know you sort of already talked about it, but just before we got online here tonight, I noticed an article that popped up on my computer where some people were complaining that McDavid did not go out on the ice and accept that award. So,
I
what do you think? Yeah.
well, I mean, I don't think that we're going to hear very much about it. I mean, if we were going to, we already would have. So none of the sports channels have really said much about it. So I don't foresee anything, and I think it's only a matter of time before they probably, um, maybe not with the Conn Smythe Trophy. I think they're going to give that out at the end of every Stanley Cup final because generally it's someone that's on the winning team. But I'm just curious if they may do away with the presentations of the Campbell Trophy and the Prince of Wales Trophy.
Oh, yeah, because nobody will touch the darn thing, right?
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, the teams will just go around and take a picture. So I think at some point they may kind of, maybe not present that award out on the ice just because of all the superstitious, thoughts about it. So who knows? We'll see. The NHL is pretty much a league that sticks to tradition when it comes to those things, but the teams might. Yeah, I don't know. I think they might not care as much for that because ultimately the goal that they want is to win the Stanley Cup. So,
Right, right. And after Florida touched it last year, there's no way they were touching it this year. Now I'm sure no team will ever touch it again.
well, I know that they were showing some clips as soon as the final buzzer went in that game. Paul Maurice told the players, "Don't
I
touch
saw
the
that. Yeah.
trophy." So,
Yeah.
um,
He was telling that to Barkov. He was saying that to
yeah,
Barkov.
yes, it was
Yeah.
Barkov he was talking to. So, you know, uh, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with it with that type of thing. But they may eventually just kind of present that later, almost not like the NHL awards, but maybe they'll turn that into a thing that they present in the dressing room after the game or something. But we'll see.
Fair. Probably a good idea. Probably a good idea. So, Mike, is there anything else you wanted to add to our discussion this evening?
Well, I'm just curious, see what's going to happen with the draft this coming weekend. There's talks of some trades and that sort of stuff.
And there's already been some trades too. Very interesting.
There's been a little bit, yeah, nothing huge yet. There's been some small moves, more or less. Some teams trying to create some more cap room for themselves.
Right.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I don't think we're going to really see anything as far as any of the top picks of the draft getting traded or anything. But I think we're going to see some moves made for, teams trying to trade off some bad contracts, perhaps, or that type of thing. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the very good news that I received is that the Russian team released Matvey Michkov from his contract.
I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, so that happened Tuesday morning. So now he's in negotiations with the Flyers on his entry level deal. So the expectation is he's going to be over here within a couple of weeks to sign his contract after
Wow.
these issues get sorted out, and he'll be with the Flyers this year. So
You weren't
looking
expecting
forward
that for another year at least?
well, all the with the contract he was on over in the KHL, he wasn't going to be here for pretty much 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, so we're getting him 2 years early, which I'm quite happy about. I think he's going to be, you know, one of the pieces that the Flyers haven't had in so long, and that's having a guy that is a shooter that can score goals. I mean, Flyers have always been known as like more of a gritty team. They've never had, you know, the top scorers of the league since like the Legion of Doom days. Um, they've never really had those type of players. I mean, Giroux did have some really good years.
Yeah,
However,
Giroux was a really good player.
right. But as far as having multiple players, you know, uh, adding Mitchkov is going to be a step in the right direction. So looking forward to that.
Excellent, excellent. And we are not done for the season, folks. We are going to have more hockey talks. They're just not going to be every week. So tune in and we'll get some more shows out there. So, folks, let us know where we went wrong by commenting below in the comment section. That is what it is for. Remember, do not like, share, or subscribe because why in the hell would you? All right. So we'll see you next time. Mike, good show. We'll talk to you later.
Later.